Hi there. So before I get started, if I can please ask you to subscribe to my channel, like this video, that would be amazing. Appreciate it. Let's get to the word. Something the Lord has been talking to me about lately is familiarity. So the word familiar means common or something that you've become accustomed to. And this is especially true right now because I know everyone has been trying to find their new normal, as people will call it, but it's not necessarily a new normal. It's just a shift in the way that we do things. I mean, I definitely think a lot of these things are not of God. The powers of darkness that we are fighting against, like we talked about before, that we need to use prayer to fight against all of these powers of darkness. But it's definitely uncharted territory right now. And when we get into uncharted territory, that's when we want to go back to things that were familiar. And if you haven't read about this lovely group of people called the Israelites in the Bible, I would strongly encourage you to read about them. It's funny because when you first read about the Israelites and you read about how the Lord straight up delivered them with signs and wonders, parted the Red Sea, all this crazy stuff, and then the Israelites still, they continually go back to, Lord, you should have left us in Egypt, and Lord, let's go back to Egypt, but they were in oppression and bondage and slavery in Egypt. But the thing was, they had been there for 400 years. I would get familiar with oppression, bondage, and slavery if I was living there for 400 years too. You see your parents and your parents' parents and their parents all go through the same thing, so it became very familiar to them. And it wasn't until God sent Moses to straight up break them out of that familiarity that they realized that there could be something different. So I want to read from Isaiah 30, verses 1 and 2. It says, "Ah, stubborn children, declares the Lord." He's talking about the Israelites. "Ah, stubborn children who carry out a plan, but not mine, who make an alliance, but not of my spirit, that they may add sin to sin, who set out to go down to Egypt without asking for my direction, to take refuge in the protection of Pharaoh, and to seek shelter in the shadow of Egypt." The Israelites didn't want to go back to bondage and oppression and slavery, but they wanted that familiarity because it's comfortable. It's what they knew. The Lord was taking them into the promised land, and the Israelites had no idea how or what was going on. But it's when they're going into that unknown place that the Lord can bless them, because they have to trust the Lord, because it's all unknown, it's all new, it's unfamiliar. And like I said, when we first look at the Israelites and we see that God straight up showed them signs, miracles, wonders, and yet they still want to go back to Egypt, before we start thinking that the Israelites are crazy people, let's look in the mirror. How many things has the Lord brought us through that we continually want to go back to the familiar? And of course, I'm talking to myself here because there's so many things that the Lord has brought me through. And yet there are times that I just want everything to go back to the way it was, even though I was under oppression and bondage and slavery of sin. It's scary when you don't know the freedom that can happen when we're in Christ Jesus. And so I would just encourage you, please, 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 please. I know that it's so much easier to go back to the familiar, but we have to go. We have to go into the unknown in order to receive the promises that God has for us. So wrestle with God a little bit and spend some time with Him to go into the unfamiliar. Here we go. Love you with the Jesus love.